Strange Bones. That's me. And tonight we are going to be doing what should have been done yesterday, but alas and alack I wasn't able to, so instead we're doing it tonight. But that said, we are going to be looking into what we started with and have been doing for a little bit of a time. We're going around the world as we always do, and our current topic is shapeshifters by and large. And as we are wandering around and looking at that, welcome to you all. Dante, good to see you back. I hope you are having a good evening. It is suitably freezing cold at the moment, and I do not approve, but nevertheless, as we go around looking at the different places around the world, we pick a country and consider it, and then put it to our current theme, which, as I've said, is shapeshifters. But I remind you, on the channel we have one rule: don't be rude, because if you are rude, you are given the boot. That said, we appreciate many views and opinions, lots of comments, and we very much hope that you will absolutely take the time to like, share, subscribe, and all the rest of that sort of stuff to keep the channel going and give it its strength. So I would appreciate if you did that. Join in, become a fan, and do all of the things. Send lots of gifts and help us reach our particular target. But with that, let's look at beginning. Now, today's place of choice are the Nordic lands, those that we tend to call the Vikings. But we do need to clear a couple of things up as we get going. The first of which is that, as a matter of fact, there is no such people as the Vikings. Now, you might say that seems a bit of an odd one, but here's how it works, if you will. Vikings were not a people. Viking was what you did. You quite literally went Viking, and it was a practice of a number of the Chthonic tribes. And that's quite important to note, because it includes a few different related peoples from Norway, Greenland, even Sweden, which is quite interesting. Now, among them, one of the common things that made them what they were was a deep belief in the runes. Now, why are the runes important? Well, the runes are important for a number of reasons. They were given to the people, according to their beliefs, by Odin, the great god Odin, one of the Aesir. And what makes him particularly important, and what makes the runes important, is that it encoded not only the concepts of magic and religion, but it also encoded society and how things worked. So they were fundamental to life and society and the way things worked. And if you look at the runes, you realize that they are organized into sets of 8, in fact, so that you have Freyr's 8, which are all about health, wealth, and happiness. You have Tyr's 8, which is all about justice. And of course you have Hel's 8, which is all about consequence. So the view of the world was encoded, if you will, within the runes. And within that there were a number of other things as well, most importantly to understanding the world was stories, what we would call folklore. And in Nordic mythology, be it Danish, Faroese, Icelandic, Norwegian, or Finnish, they had the same basic idea, which they called Hamir. And Hamir was the stories that encoded life and made up the world. And within that, they would tell many interesting things about what they believed, which was quite important. So Hamir, which referred to the idea of that which encapsulates you. It would refer to, in a sense, your spirit, shall we say. It also referred, in a certain sense, to that which made you you. The skin that you wore, which, of course, in terms of shapeshifters, can mean more than one. Now, your ghost, your spirit, your personhood, but your being, your Hama in Old English. And shapeshifting meant that you had control of the Hamir, the way in which you were. And varying beings and people could do this. People skilled in sorcery were able to transform their Hamir and become a number of different things. But of course the gods and certain other spirits could do this. There were those who could become what they referred to as a Freyas, to become one of Freya's birds, the falcon. Certain of the berserkers could, according to legend, take on at least the spirit of their totem animal, or possibly even the shape itself. And of course, Norse mythology is full of this kind of thing. The Valkyries could become ravens. There were those who could turn into swans. So among the Aesir, the falcon Hamir is quite important. We know that the giants, Thiazi and Sortungur, had an eagle Hamir. The Aesir, well, the adopted Aesir, Loki, because of course Loki was in fact a Vanir, but he was adopted to the Aesir, and he could turn into all kinds of things and was famous to it, and use that to achieve quite a few different forms and do various things. Odin could also change himself and disguise himself like that. Sigurd appears in a very famous saga which has a number of characters that shapeshift, including Otir, literally the otter, Andvari, who could become a fish, and Fafnir, who could become a dragon. So shapeshifting in Nordic belief was a fairly common skill among those that could. Certain trolls could also manage to change to different things, and some of it actually led to a number of difficulties. So, for example, a famous berserk, which would have been from the bear cult, was Eric the Red, and he rose to great fame because of his abilities in combat as a berserk. But of course it led to his downfall as well, because while in full battle, to have the hammer of a bear would be very useful and very good. But in ordinary peaceful times, having a small argument with your neighbor, going nuts and slaughtering them, would lead to all kinds of trouble. And in fact, we find in history those who were berserkers were in fact eventually outlawed, and it was banned. It was no longer allowed because of the difficulty that came along with that sort of thing. The werewolf myth in Europe owes quite a lot of connection to the Nordic cultures and their understandings, because of course you had the Ulfhednar, the wolf heathens, which could turn, they said, into wolves, and that of course terrified people. And it was even put in law that you can't just do this. And there were varying things that were said in regard that it could lead to a kind of temporary madness. There was a legend that was told in Sweden of a terrible difficulty they had with a bear that was rampaging around, and they suspected there was more to it, and as it turned out, it seemed that there was, where this fellow, it seemed, was a man called Pitta, and he would turn into a bear and attack the livestock, slaughtering it and running. And there was an old man that saw this bear attack his flock, and he took an axe, and as the bear went past, he took a swing and hit the side of the bear. And when this came about, they eventually caused this bear to be caught where it was trying to hide on the roof of the cattle shed, and they got ready to take the bear out, and they called men with guns, but the bear's hair began to smoke, but he wasn't hurt, and they thought perhaps this was a problem. And the bear then turned into a man and fled, shocking everybody. So there was that one. There were also legends where there was a man that turned into a wolf, and he would appear and disappear around the neighborhood, and he went as a wolf for a whole year. And when they went and checked on this wolf man, they discovered that he could live in either form, and he was he was one of the known people around type thing. So there were a lot of stories of these people that could change their hamir, and indeed there was one where a bear that was attacking a village was shot by one of the women in the village, and they found that the bear's hair had braids, just like a particular woman that thereafter was never seen in the village again. So we see that there's a lot to be said, but shapeshifters are definitely a major part. So who were responsible for this shape-shifting skin? Well, the gods, of course, including the Aesir and the Vanir, of which I think Loki is probably the most famous, and Odin. But also giants and humans and trolls, and of course, to a fair degree, the Alfar as well, the Ljósálfar and the Svartálfar, the light elves and the dark elves. And then, of course, amongst them all, the most famous would have been the Berserkir. Now, Loki was the god of mischief and notorious for shape-shifting. He did it all the time. The All-Father Odin, who was known to transform into an eagle, a raven, and other forms when it suited his particular purposes, as they say. The Jotun, the giants, who are natural shapeshifters who could change their sizes and forms in all kinds of ways. Certain humors could change their Hamir or Hugid to take on the bodies of animals, but the one we know the most are the Berserk, and it would give them strategic abilities and greater strengths and skills. But as I said, it comes with different problems. So what makes up a person? Well, in the view of the Old Nork, you had the Hamr, which was your shape, form, and appearance. The Hugir, your thought. Your Folgi, which kind of means follower. It's your other self, your spirit self, which can in certain ways be your inner opposite and which is part of you but can separate from you. And then, of course, the Haminya, your luck. Now, the Hamir is your shape or skin, and this can be changed as shield skins can. There are several shield skins that make up what you are. So you're Skiptahom, you're changing Hamir, and it's called Hamirar, the strong Hamir that you can manipulate around to become more than just a man. Now, of course, the Hugir, or your thought, is your mind, your ability to be you, your inner self, which is very, very important. And even if your Hamir changes, your Hugir usually stays within, though it can be suppressed by the strength and madness of your Hamir. Your Folgi, it's not quite the same as a familiar spirit like in European folklore. It's kind of more than that. Your Folgi, of course, is your plural. The singular would be Fylgir. It's usually an animal form, but it can change when need to, and be more. It's the attendant spirit whose well-being is intimately tied to that of its owner. If either one dies, the other does too, and they're closely connected to the character of the owner. So having a Fylgir that is of a bear or wolf would, of course, lend you very much to the ability to become that in your other form, in your other Hamir. And then, of course, as we said, you have your Haminya, which is kind of luck, but also somehow destiny, success, personal power and potency in that regard. So it's a little bit of a mix, and it's tied into your ability to have fame as well, and all are important. So as we see, shape-shifting is common. Lots of different shape-shifters. You can become something more when you change your hamir and manifest the spirit within you into actual form, your hugir. But you can change in accordance with your folgi or your hamingya when they bring on a different form, which usually means that your spirit becomes that and moves out, gaining a kind of physicality while your actual body remains behind, as opposed to the other version, like the Berserker, which would actually change and take on far more. Now, of course, we know that the Berserker were absolutely real in real life. They were known things, and it was said that the greatest among them could physically change, but some only changed in its spirit. So perhaps there are different levels. Now, the gods did their thing. The magic users would generally use Seder. Seder is one of the two kinds of Nordic magic, which is very, very important. And interestingly enough, is considered to be female magic compared to Galder, which is more masculine magic. But people could do both. It wasn't a separated thing, just there were different views on how it worked in that regard. Now, amongst that, we do need to mention that you got specific kinds. So amongst all the various shapeshifters, some were very, very specifically female, and the most famous of all that you would encounter would probably be the Selkie, which of course we know from a number of other cultures as well. The Selkie are in fact reverse weirs in a way, because instead of being a person who can become an animal, they are an animal who can become a person. So it approaches from the other side, and they are notably a seal person. They can shed their seal skin in order to become a human, and sometimes they would even live human lives and marry, but keep secret their other form. And if anyone ever found out that they were Selkie, they would of course flee. But there was a possibility, if you could find and hide their seal skin, then they couldn't change back and they would have to stay with you. But if they ever managed to get it again, their wrath upon you would be great. And they would not only leave you, but they would leave you destitute and bereft, and they would ruin you. And if you went so far as to actually destroy the seal skin, so terrible a thing would cause them to die, but they would communicate it to their family, and terrible, terrible things would be brought upon you for such an awful act against the Selkie. So not a good idea at all. Now, the other very famous variety of female shapeshifter are the Huldra folk, also sometimes known as the Skogsra. Now, these were very interesting because they were a forest-dwelling female race related somehow to cows. They had a cow's tail. That is the one way to know that they were not human, and they were very beautiful and very skilled in many things, and would often marry men, but keep secret the fact that they were Huldra. Sometimes they could be a little bit bad, and they could somehow go dark and do some fairly awful things to people in order to get their own way, possibly because it seems that there are no male forms of Huldra that I can easily find mention of, though one would assume that there are. Now, of course, shapeshifting turns up in the very important sagas. So the Volsung sagas, for example, speak of a number. So Sigurd's mother could become a she-wolf when she wanted to, and when Sigurd had to fight the Volsung brothers, his mother transformed into a giant wolf and attacked them with him. Signy, thinking to preserve her family line, worked with a sorceress who changed into Signy's place, allowing Signy to secretly conceive a child with a strong Volsung lineage, which was pretty dark in and of itself. The Hamramar was the outer self only changing, which may or may not allow you to have a decent state of mind while changed. Hey, how are you? I hope you're in good form there. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Glad to see you on board. Now, the Selkie, of course, are the most famous, and they're the nice ones. They are not dangerous, generally, unless you really upset them. You will find them not only in Nordic culture, but also in Celtic. And indeed, the Scots word for seal is Sealkie. So you can see a strong connection there. And Selkie sometimes are referred to as the Selkie folk or the seal folk. And in many of the northern islands, they are considered to be a very real thing. Now, their skin, which they could take on and off, was the most important part. I am so good. I'm not entirely certain if that's a good or a bad thing. I'd like to think it's a good thing. You can tell me if it is. I'm not sure, but thank you. Now, their dual nature is very important because it's natural to them. Ah, well, in that case, that's a good thing. Thank you very much. I do appreciate that greatly. And we see that the Selkies turn up in a lot of other places with a lot of stories, but they are very much a Nordic thing as well. And it is said that they can be bound by the taking of their skins. They can also come and stay with you for 7 years at a time if they want to. Some say that they can only become human once every 7 years because their bodies house condemned souls. But I strongly suspect this is something that turned up much later with the arrival of Christianity, and it isn't part of the older beliefs. Despite that, and of course you will find tales in the Orkney Islands, the Shetland Islands, and more. There's no doubt that they're important, but among the Chthonic people, you have the Selshamurin, the sealskin, which is an amazing story, which was written down and published by John Arnason, who relates the old story of a man from Myrdalur who forced a woman transformed from a seal to marry him after taking possession of her sealskin. She discovers the key to the chest in her husband's unusual clothing when he dresses up for a Christmas outing, and she is able to get her skin back and be reunited with the male seal who was her betrothed partner. And of course she escapes, and the man that did this got given some serious stick for what he did, for which we are quite glad. Another such tale is on Gudmundsson the Learned from 1641. And he recorded the tale saying that these Selkies were in fact a kind of sea elf related to the Marmenalar, the mermaids or mermen. And the elves, of course, come in many, many varieties in the varying cultures. So this story tells of a man who comes across the dancing and celebrating of elves within a cave by the ocean. And the cave is lined with seal skins. And as soon as the elves take notice of the man, they rush to don their skins and dive back into the ocean. However, the man is able to steal the smallest of the skins, sliding it under his shirt and hiding it. The owner of the skin tries to retrieve it from the man, but he takes hold of the young elf and takes her to his home, where he forces her to be his wife. The man and the elf are together for 2 years, producing 2 children, a boy and a girl. But the elf does not love the man, but is forced to obey because he has her skin. During this time, the former elf woman's husband swims along the shore by the couple's home. One day, the elf woman finds her skin and runs away, never to be seen again. So it's said that certain people might quite possibly be the half-children of the sea elves. You never know, especially in the islands. So there are a lot of different ideas about this. Now, the children produced by the coupling of a Selkie and a human are born with certain physical characteristics that set them aside from normal children. It's said that the children of a male Selkie and a human woman have slightly webbed toes and fingers, and if the webbing is cut, a rough, rigid growth takes its place. We see as well that if a woman gives birth to a son with a seal's face after falling in love with a Selkie man, a dream will reveal the location of silver, so that the woman Cool. Welcome.
Hi, Bones. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
Good. Yeah, no, I only popped in now, so I'm not sure what the topic is about.
Well, the theme that we are still on is shapeshifters. We started with the origins and such of werewolves around the world. But of course, that leads on to the other shapeshifters, because you don't get wolves everywhere. So we started looking at the specific shapeshifters of different places. And tonight we are doing those of the Chthonic cultures, the Vikings and the Nords. Huge thanks to Omar for the likes there. I do appreciate. But yeah, so you'll find there are quite a few shapeshifters, and it was asked specifically that we do it because the most famous of all of the shapeshifters in Viking culture are the Berserkers. So that's where we're going tonight.
I've got one.
Yes?
I don't know, but wasn't there like a Viking that turns into a raven?
That's one of the forms. There are actually 4 forms of what we would call a berserker. The actual strict berserker are bear warriors, but there were 4 varieties, one of which is in fact a raven. You are quite correct. So when we get onto the berserkers, we will do that. We're just cutting through on the Selkie, which is one of the most famous shapeshifters. And in fact, it's a reverse version, if you will, because instead of being a person that can become a seal, it is a seal that can become a person if they wish. So what would you call it? If a werewolf is a human that can become a wolf, would you call it a wolf were if it's a wolf that can become a person? It's a fair question, isn't it? So yes, Selkies are not people, but animals, but they can become people if they so desire. So there's a different view of shape-shifting for you. Of course, as we know, we've got all the gods, Loki of which is the most famous for his shape-shifting, but several of them do, as do varying giants and trolls. And of course, you have the Huldra which we've touched on already.
The Selkie, you said that's a seal.
Yes, the Selkie is a seal.
What is that thing called it's like the seahorse that turns into a human?
Aha! That is one of the other ones. We hadn't got to him yet, but that is what they call a Kelpie. And they're actually malevolent. They are bad, always, whereas Selkies are good. What the Kelpie does, it's a kind of water spirit, and it usually changes not into a person, though it can, but into a horse, a very, very pretty one, which you just want to ride. But once you're on its back, you're unable to get off, and then it jumps into the water and drowns you and eats you, which perhaps is not a very nice thing to do. But yes, famous among the stories and legends. So, and similar in pronunciation, I suppose, between Selkie and Kelpie, but they are quite different. Now, they do say among the Selkie as well, you can tell if somebody is the child of a Selkie, if their skin has a slightly greenish tinge, or if they dry very easily and need to keep dampening their skin, or if they have a slightly fishy odor to them. It might be an indication that they are the child of a Selkie. Now, of course, along with that, you've got the Alfar, which are very famous among all of the Chthonic cultures. And you have the Lios Alfar and the Svart Alfar, and they, of course, can change all the time as well. You know, the Alfar are the Nordic version of what we would call the elves, or in British terminology, the fairy. Now, you get in the Celtic understanding, which is some distantly related to the Nordic, you have the court of the light and you have the court of dark. And the court of light are the Tuatha De Danann, the children of Danu, and the court of the dark are the children of Anun, the Lord of the Dead. And you will find them in things like the Mabinogion, in the Tainbo Kulain, and more, spoken of very often. So, absolutely there's a shared thing. But we are with the Nordic people today, the Chthonic, which stretches from Germany all the way through Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Iceland, and to the Faroe Islands. So the Chthonic people are the tall, blonde, blue-eyed types like the Vikings, who are not Vikings at all, as I mentioned in the beginning. There is no such thing as a Viking. Viking is what you do. Did you know that? So you go Viking, which means you go raiding. And then you bring home lots and lots of money so you can farm properly. So Viking only happened at certain times of the year when it was suitable for sailing out. But there were famous ones. Yes.
It's raiding, but you have to sail out to raid to be a Viking.
Correct. And of course, as we know, Eric the Red, the famous Viking who became one of the great leaders in the Nordic lands, made his name going Viking because he was a Berserk. But alas and alack, in shooting along with all of that, he made money. But when he came home and tried to live peacefully, his Berserk nature got him outlawed because it was a problem. Now, with that said, there were many great heroes who were Berserkerganger, those who could change their Hamir in that regard. Now, where would this become important? Well, whenever there was serious trouble, whenever there was war or bad monsters or giants that needed to be dealt with, then you wanted a berserker. You didn't want one at home unless it was the right kind. Now, what is the right kind? Well, for that we need to know the different kinds of Berserkganger. Now, where did I drop my... There we go. Let's talk about the 4 types. Now, the first type were literally the Berserkganger, the bear skin warriors. Now, remember, when we speak of a bear skin, yes, they would have probably worn bear skins as well, but they're referring not to the bear skin, but to their hamir, their physical self, which was considered to be a kind of skin. And obviously they were shamanistic warriors defined by their animal totem, which could let them go into a mad rage, foaming at the mouth and biting the edge of their shield and just throwing themselves into battle, seemingly unhurt by any injury they took, and absolutely devastating warriors, which terrified the enemy. But the problem with that is, yeah, great in battle, not so good if their rage goes unchecked or if they don't have a proper enemy. So this particular kind of warrior was literally, as I said, banned at a point. However, the greatest of the bear warriors, the Berserkir, they said could actually transform into a giant bear with huge strength and almost impenetrable skin that could tear the enemy apart. And of course, legends made them into these hugely feared beast men. But the problem with the Berserker was that they were utterly uncontrolled. Not so the case of the Ulfhethnar. Now, the Ulfhethnar are the wolf warriors, and they were different because their hamir was not a bear, but that of the wolf. And yes, they would wear wolf hides as well, because it was their shamanistic totem, and they would howl like wolves in battle. And but what made them dangerous was that they were organized. These ones would work as a pack, and they were more like rangers than warriors in many ways. They were hunters, and absolutely terrifying, because they said that once a pack of the Ulfhethnar were on your trail, you were doomed. Give up, you were going to die, no matter what, because they were going to get you. And that was an absolutely terrifying thought for anyone. But again, they were difficult to control, and so as well, they too became banned and outlawed, and often chased from their own lands. What made them most powerful was that they were incredibly fast, light, and worked by incredible speed, working in this pack that could be up to 20 or 30 warriors, which would be very, very, very frightening. Now, the third variety were never banned, and there was a reason for that. And the reason is simply this: they didn't lose their minds in battle. And these are the Svinfylkingar, or the Jofer, the Boer warriors. And what made them most important was that they were connected not with the Aesir, like the wolves and the bears, who were the children of Odin. They were in fact connected to the Vanir, like Freyr and Freya. So they were quite different. And of course they had a lot more importance in the Germanic paganism than they did among the Vikings. But it was said that if you could get some of the Jofer, they would be the best possible gods you could ever have, because they never gave the line, and they would literally stand till they died. They would fight with a very interesting wedge shape that would cut into any attack. And yes, they wore bearskins, boreskins I should say, but most importantly, they were loyal to the last. If they gave their word to protect somebody, you knew that every last one of them was dead before the enemy would get to you, because they would stand to the end. They were immensely loyal, so very much prized as guards, and they were the absolute elite, royal bodyguards, protectors of the great Jarls, which were very, very important. Now, you can see where the Berserkers became a problem, where you had what they referred to as the Hall Berserker, where he wasn't out fighting in battles as you would want. No, not at all. Alas, he was the one that would get overly drunk and get angry, and then challenge people to duels for their land or wives, and cause all kinds of ruckus, which, because they were berserkers, it would become a problem to put them down. And usually it meant you would have to just fight them to the death. So that was a serious problem. They were sometimes referred to of the Holmgangumadr, or the Holmgangdumaster, the dueling berserkers, and they were considered very much to be villains, and have to be defeated in proper combat, the Holmganger. So it was always a good idea that if you had a berserker around, when you weren't actually doing fighting, you would send him off doing Viking, because at least then the people he was fighting weren't yours, and he would come back with gold. Huge thanks to Billy for the likes. I appreciate that very, very greatly. Now, the last of the Berserks was the most awful and the most terrifying. And these were definitely Vanir related, and they were related to Freyr, and sometimes to Hel. Usually Freyr, because Freyr was the one who, even before Odin chose his warriors from the fallen for Valhalla, Freyr got her choice first, and the Valkyries did not take you, as most people say, to Valhalla. That was not their job at all. They did not belong to Odin. The Vikings belonged to Freya, and they would actually take her choice of warriors to the fields of sunshine, the golden fields of Freya, and she got first choice. But of course it still is all connected up to Ragnarok and all of that. So even Odin, the All-Father, only got second choice on the battlefield. So just so as you know. But the ones that perhaps were the most terrifying of the Berserk were completely in control of their change and were connected in many ways to necromancy, magic, and the dark arts of poisoning. And they were the assassins, the Raven Hamir, who could turn into these dark birds that would gather to watch when those died were given burial, and who gathered on the battlefield. They were considered to be the most frightening because, unlike the Berserk, if a Berserk was crossed with you, you would know it. You would see him coming a mile off. You could at least ready yourself for battle. And so too with the Ulfhethnar and the Jofur. But with the Raven warriors, you would never know until it was too late. They were the darkest of the assassins, and even those who dared hire them did so with fear in their hearts. The most terrifying who became the Raven and became the doom of many. So there you go, the four Berserk of Chthonic mythology in that regard. But they are not alone as shapeshifters. They are just the most famous ones. There are a number of others. And again, here again, we see something. Hey there. That's awesome. If you can get Hussein to join, that would be awesome. Give it a bash, but welcome nevertheless. And thank you for the sharing on the live. I do appreciate it. Big hearts to you indeed. It's always nice when we get people coming back. Now, among the varying cultures we've examined so far, shapeshifters are always connected to water spirits and water, and it's not entirely clear why, because very often what they can turn into has got nothing to do with water at all. No problem there, heart. Do you do that? We'll wait for you. Say again.
I wanted to say something about, after you spoke about werewolves.
Yes.
Wolves. And then I remember watching a clip somewhere about a shaman turning into a wolf.
Yeah.
So I also just googled it. And yeah, no, shaman don't shapeshift.
Yes.
They can move their spirit inside into a different animal.
Well, there are different forms of this, and we haven't yet done the Amerindian shaman because they have more than one method, and some of it's good, and some of it is particularly not good. Because don't forget, your skinwalkers from Navajo mythology are people. They're witches. They're not a cryptid or a monster. They're a person who deliberately changes for evil reasons. Well, so, yeah, no, we will get to them in a future life because absolutely there are a number that need to be spoken of there. So hold that thought.
Shamans in the Nordic times?
There are, but they have different names. Huge thanks to Dirk there for the likes. Guys, do likes, supports, and all the rest of it, please, please. But yes, so in the Chthonic cultures, you get two forms of magic. You have the Seidr and you have Galder. Galder is very much the male version of magic, and it refers to spoken magic. It's magic of song, of speech, of that kind of thing. Whereas Seidr is more ritual magic, and it's considered very much to be women's magic. Not in a bad way, or that, but as in a different, yes.
What is a oracle or a seer?
Say that again about a seer.
Oracle.
Yes. Well,
What exactly is that?
well,
Not about the shaman.
yes as well. Oracles, of course, are the Greek version, but specifically an oracle is purely interested in divination. And by and large, especially the Greek ones, that's all they did. Now,
They don't really do magic, they only see the future. Maybe?
yeah, pretty much. Whereas in the Nordic tradition, seeing the future would be done through the runes. So, well, one of the ways is through the runes. If you do it through the runes, it would be a Galder magic, because Galder comes from Odin. But it has roots in Seidr, which Odin did master, according to legend. So it's also feminine in certain respects, but it's a ritual form of magic. So divination belongs to ritual magic rather than spoken magic. And the Nords made a differentiation in that regard. So if you were to do divination, you were probably going to be doing Seidr. But Seidr, of course, is, as most water magic and Vanir magic, it's that kind of feminine and water magic. And shape-shifting is very much connected to the water. And amongst others, you will have those creatures such as the Nokken, which are very dangerous freshwater spirits that can shapeshift into, like the Kelpie. This is the Nordic version of the Kelpie. The Kelpie is a Welsh, Scots, and English word for much the same thing. So they can take the form of a handsome man, a beautiful woman, or a very beautiful horse to get their victims into the water to drown them. They are carnivorous, and what they like to eat most of all is you, just so you know. So the
animal, you probably know the animal that shapeshifts, and it lives in water and it shapeshifts.
well, there's a lot that do. You've got your Nokken, also called Nixies. The Kelpies absolutely are among them. But
this is a name that everybody would know, and it's octopus. It can
yes,
take the form of a rock or a tree.
that is absolutely true. And in fact, in a number of cultures, octopuses were considered to be creatures to be deeply feared because they could change. And of course, they are absolutely scientifically real. So there is no doubt that they exist. So it makes them even more frightening in that way. So yeah, octopus. And of course, if you're a fan of Disney, you know that the Little Mermaid is assisted, so to speak, by the water, the sea witch, who is in fact half an octopus. So yes, absolutely. Now, amongst other things as well, we said warriors could be shapeshifters, which there were a number of famous ones, such as Hrolf-Kraki, who was a king. He was a bearthak and could turn into a bear. Absolutely. All the gods we know, they change all the time. Loki switches back and forth so often it's anybody's guess what his shape is. Those that can use their Hamir are the important ones of power. Now, who are the most famous? Well, as we said, it's got to be Loki right up at the top. He is the one who managed to transform into a female horse in order to give birth to Sleipnir, who became Odin's favored horse. We know that in some manner or form he was the mother of Fenrir, the giant wolf that was nailed down and kept in place due to the sacrifice of Tyr, who lost his hand in the binding of the Fenris wolf. So absolutely. So he was one of the Aesir, but Loki was not an Aesir, he was a Vanir, as were a number of the others that lived among the Aesir, including Freya and Freyr. So there were a number, and Loki could turn into a salmon, a fly, a flea, a mare, apparently a wolf as well, seeing as he gave birth to one. So he was absolutely a master of deception. Elmarie Terblanche, thank you so much for the sharing of the live. Guys, do that. We rely on you to support us. So like, share, subscribe, do all of the good things, and do send gifts because we need them to build the channel. So yes. Now,
there's a creature.
yes.
I'm not really sure if it's a shapeshifter. I know that Little Mermaid, mermaids, they're not shapeshifters. And this one would also not be a shapeshifter. Have you ever heard of? I'm not sure what it's called, but it's like a deer woman.
Yes. Now that specifically is from the North Americas. So there you have the deer people. The Vikings had the Huldra folk, which were cow people, strangely enough. So kind of like, but not quite the same. But yes, absolutely, deer people we will get to as well in due course.
You probably get a lot of them. Horse people.
Again, what you tend to find is like where you don't get wolves, you generally don't get werewolves. Where you get a lot of wolves, you get werewolves. So you get, for example, no werewolves among the Hawaiian Islands, none. But you do get were sharks, which kind of makes sense. So you get your kinds of shapeshifters, by and large, where you get those kinds of animals. And I suppose it makes sense because if you're trying to hide yourself away and pass off as something else, if people go, hey, what the hell was that animal? I've never seen one before. You haven't hidden very well. So you tend to get the creatures and the shifters in the same place. So we get no werewolves in Africa. But we do get were hyenas, were lions. In India, you get were tigers. Now, you get no were tigers among the Chthonic people because there are no tigers there. So, yeah. But you do get a lot of wolves, and therefore, they do have werewolves. And of course, Fenris is also the great wolf of Ragnarok, can change his shape as well, though his most powerful one is that of the Ragnarok wolf. So we've got a fair selection in that regard. Now, as we said, besides the gods and all of those, and the people who can change, and those who can change their spirits to go out through the use of their Fölgir or Folgies, then there are also the giants, the Jotun, who are natural shapeshifters, especially the frost giants and storm giants, though also the fire giants. You get different kinds of giants, yes. But the other ones that sometimes could shapeshift also include the Draugr. And of course we know the Draugr from our favorite game Skyrim, which actually depicts them fairly accurately. They were generally, besides being zombie-like undead beings, they were guardians, and they weren't particularly bad or good. They were guardians of a place, and if you disturbed the place, you got yours, just because. Dot's joined. Welcome, welcome. So yes, in that regard, you've got a number of different varieties that are quite important for your different stories and things. But shamanism is quite important, and as I've said, it was bound into the culture in certain ways. Now, your Galder, which is more your male form of magic, was very much in that regard a shamanic style, whereas your Seidr included a whole lot of things which wasn't not shamanic exactly, but it was more theistic in the way it worked, and it had a lot more rituals. And of course a lot more herb lore and alchemy. So your Galder, which would have included things like chants, dances, and all of those things that fit very well both to shamanism.
Can Lucifer shapeshift?
Well, Lucifer in particular is a Jewish creature of origin. No, because he's not a person. He was originally one of the gods, then relegated to being an angel, and then relegated to being a devil. But shape-shifting, certainly. But
he was the snake, was he not?
Arguable. It depends on how far into it that you go, and how far into Gnosticism you're willing to deep dive, because he may or may not have been. But again, it's specifically Middle Eastern and Judeo-Christian and Muslim in its view. So
he doesn't need to turn into a snake, he can just make a snake.
Well, either or, dependent on what stage of the belief you're talking about, because in some he was a snake, in some he can turn into a snake, in others, well, it's a bit dubious as exactly what he is. Your Gnostic...
He's not really a god, right? He can't create.
Again, at what stage are we talking? Because he originates right the way back with the beings in the pre-singular God view, that those that became what we know of as the Israelites would have had. So
he's a son of God.
That's a modern view. If we're talking in the modern view, yes. But if you go far enough back and you look at what the names of the gods, you had El Elyon. El Elyon means the strongest god among the gods. So originally, there were many gods, and what afterwards becomes the only God was actually considered to be just the most powerful God and our God, not your God, though there are other gods. And if you look at the earliest Hebrew writings, it actually says, you shall not worship any other God but me. But it implies that there are other gods. So it was known that there were many gods, just that he was their God, El Elyon. Sota, Emmanuel, Hagia, Tetragrammaton, Hagia, Thotheos, Isiros. All the names of God.
Where does the other angel, Satan,
Well, as things progressed, if you're going to say there is only one God and nothing else is a God, well, what are they? They have to be something. So they get relegated into different statuses, either demons or spirits or angels or fallen angels. So they get different roles as different views develop and different understandings develop. Now, obviously, they would tell you very, very quickly that as God revealed more to us, we came to understand he was the only God, and these other beings were lesser. It was always that way, but we've only understood it now. But again, that's how the progression of religion within a person. So it changes. But again, as I say, they are totally separate from the Nordic view. The Nords believed that there were a number of gods, and there were different kinds of gods. Odin was the All-Father, and therefore the most important god of the Aesir, but he was not by any means the only god, and among the Vanir, they had their leaders too. So you had the Aesir and the Vanir. So, and then besides that, you had all the other creatures that were not necessarily gods. And shamanism...
What about Norse, I don't know, Viking?
Nordic beliefs, they're still held today by some people. It's a living religion.
I know them only from Marvel.
Well, most people do. It's sort of very much a Chthonic thing and a family thing, because that's the way the culture worked. So most of us...
But Valhalla, which is heaven.
That is one of the places that is heaven. That's Odin's place. There are 9 realms. Which did come up, it did come up in the Marvel version as well. It did. But to go on with it, shamanism would have been Caesar for the ritual type stuff, but Galder for the chanting and dance, which would have fitted very well with the warrior cults, both the Berserker and the Althethnar, especially, and the Jofur as well, though nobody really knows what the Raven shifters did, because, well, they were so unbelievably secretive that if you weren't one of them, you never knew, except very, very briefly and just before you didn't know anything at all. So there was absolutely a shamanic connection to it. Now, generally, the typical Caesar worker wasn't a warrior and was often a woman. So they made a differentiation between the ordinary shaman, who generally stayed at home and looked after everyone and did their job properly, and the warrior shamans, who were very much specifically the ones you wanted when there was a battle going on, but not any other time. So the Berserker and the Althethnar, it's a bit hard to pronounce because the Nordic TH is halfway between a TH in English and a D. So Ulfhednar, in a way. It's kind of difficult to say. But again, we're talking... Sorry?
I know. Sorry, I want to use you as an educator, but it's okay. It's fine.
No, it's all good. What did you want to hear?
If you can maybe talk more about the gods, I want to know about their capabilities, like maybe Odin. What can he actually do? Can he shapeshift?
Odin is famous for it. So, as I say, the shamanism is where the power comes from. Now, some people, if they are decent, can manage to also learn bits of Galdra and Sever. But the ones who really master it are the Aesir and the Vanir, the gods. Now, originally, in order to master Galdr, you have to be willing to go through the trials in order to get the truth. And it takes many years. But Odin skipped it through by doing the ultimate. So he nailed himself with spears to the world tree, Yggdrasil, and he hung there watching down until he finally saw the patterns of the weird under the world tree, Yggdrasil. And if you can see and understand the pattern of the weird, that's where the runes come from. And it is from the runes that Galdr comes from, because they are both written and spoken. And of course, you have your written alphabet from it. Or what we call an alphabet is called so because it goes alpha, beta, gamma, delta, theta, eta, or A, B, C, D. Now, they have the Futhorc, Theo Thorn Ath Rad Ken Gifu Win. That's the first of the 3 eighths, Freyr's 8. So you immediately see that speech, writing, and all of that is hard written into shamanism and Galdr, and therefore into drawing as well, and most importantly, tattoos, because you could be tattooed with the powers. So we know the most famous thing is the Shield of Ore, which is a bind rune made up of very specific runes set in a pattern on a circle, which was developed and given by Odin himself, which is said to give you great strength, protection from any magics, and power in battle. And of course would have been very popular among the people that wanted to go Viking. So Odin mastered Galdr. It was his magic, and taking it, he therefore had the power of shape-shifting, of being a great warrior and more. But that was not enough, because when the Aesir encountered and made connections with the Vanir, of course the one that came across was Freyr, the sister of Freyr, and she was a master of Sever. And so Odin demanded to be taught Sever, because he wanted to know it all. He was the original know-it-all, with his ravens, Hugin and Munin, thought and understanding that would go out so he could find and know all things. And Freyr said to him, look, this is magic for women. You'll never master it. You might learn it, but you'll never master it. But Odin was determined, and through the use of Galdr, he empowered himself to the degree that he mastered Sever as well, thus becoming all-knowing as the All-Father. So he had the power of all magics, all shifting, all control, any of that. So he was absolutely the most badass. However, the most skilled in shape-shifting was one of the Vanir. All of them could. I mean, Freya was well known, cats and eagles and more. But Loki was the master of shape-shifting. And he not only appeared as different things, he actually fully, totally became them, to the degree that though he was said to be a man, he shapeshifted to a female horse and gave birth to Sleipnir. He gave birth to the world wolf, the wolf of Ragnarok, Fenrir. He also gave birth to the world worm. It's gone out of my head what its name is now in Nordic, but the creature that holds the world together was his child. So he got around and did some pretty funky things, and he became a lot of different animals just because he could, by and large, mostly to cause trouble and trick people. He did that when he stole Freya's golden hair and all of that kind of stuff. It was a bit of an arsehole, but there you go. That's Loki for you. But they were absolutely...
I know Loki through
Marvel.
Marvel.
Well, they
I know you can shapeshift into Odin.
Yes, absolutely, and he did more than once. That comes out of the Havamal, where he did indeed do that to cause trouble. And he was a bad person. He would cause trouble because he could. It was his nature. But all of the gods, to a certain degree, could. It was said, for example, that Skadi could manage to turn into a polar bear if you pissed her off enough. And as you know, polar bears are one of the world's biggest bears. There's only one bigger than a polar bear, and they are absolutely terrifying. So you wouldn't want an angry polar bear going at you. So right there you've got quite a few of the gods. But what makes it very interesting is that the Aesir and the Vanir, they form the basis not only of the legends of the Chthonic tribes. If you look at it from entirely the Vanir point of view, and you read the northern Indian legends, you find it's the other side of the story. And the Ramayana and the Mahabharata are almost the other side of the Nordic legends. And I strongly suspect that the Aesir were the Chthonic gods, and the Van were the North Indian gods that later changed and became the other type as things went along. Because we know that the swastika is not a Chthonic symbol at all. It's an Indian symbol, but was taken over by the Chthonic people and used for varying different things. So there's definitely connection.
On the topic of those gods, can you maybe tell me who exactly is Zeus? How does he fit in?
He doesn't. Zeus is a Greek god.
Okay.
So you will find connections between the Greek and the Roman gods, and that stays that side. The Nordic gods are completely separate, though they may have links to the Indian gods through the Vanir. And we know that the concept of the sort of super German that people had during World War II, that Hitler was so obsessed with becoming the tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, that actually comes from that area along the mountains between Germany and India. That's what that was. the stories of the Aesir and the Van from way back when. So it was picked up and run with by varying people for varying reasons. And I must admit, I always laugh a bit because they say blonde and blue-eyed is the uber German, but Hitler was short, black-haired and brown-eyed. Nevertheless, he was a good talker. So there's that. So yes, there are strong differences between the different gods and their respective places, and it's quite important to keep that. Oops, sorry, getting a bit warm here, so pulling off the blanket. But yeah, the different peoples have their own view of how things work. So when you jump countries, you do need to keep in mind you're talking about different things. And I see it actually in the modern world very much, where you'll have people talking about their chakras, and they get it so badly wrong because they forget that chakras come out of the Indian understanding, and it's tied into a huge cultural synergism that needs to be taken with it and understood. And it doesn't work properly out of context. Well, if you want to know what the Chthonic tribes had, and the early Britons and all of that, we had shield skins, the Hamir being your collection of shield skins, which in a way works like the chakras, but also doesn't, because it comes within a specific cultural setting. And it's very important to understand that, because, for example, by using your Hamir in a Nordic version, you can change your shape. But you can't do that with the chakras, because it's a different view of how this works. And it's important to keep that in mind as you go along with these. So, yes, the gods themselves used the powers of Galder and Sever and the shamanistic traditions, but they were used in different ways by different peoples. So your local shaman, as you might call her, usually a woman of great status, would be the one at home doing all the doings of dealing with the gods and providing healing and more. And then you had your shamanic warriors, the berserkers, that would go out to do things, which is a different set. But people had power, and if you put effort into it, you could gain power. Now, of course, this connected to your place in society. So at the lowest level, you would be what they would refer to as a trell, a slave. But again, slaves had rights. They weren't fully slaves exactly, because they were part of the people. A real slave would be a foreigner, because they didn't have any rights. Trells had rights, just not a lot. As you moved up, you would have your Hashya, which is your warrior type. You had the farmer level, you had the king level, and things went up in status as you moved up. And then sort of off to one side, in a special place, you had the priest or priestess, sort of the shaman, that had their place. But they could be so important that they were equal to a jarl or a king, dependent on their power. So it mattered, and you could gain status, even if you were born with none, by becoming a great warrior, a great priest, or whatever. So it had to do with whether or not your Hamingir was strong enough, along with your Hamir. So yes, and even maybe, possibly, become noted by the gods if you're important enough. There were cases within mythology of heroes that became so important that they gained the attention of the varying Aesir and Vanir. So, yeah, you could definitely do more for yourself if you had a good enough Hamingir. And through, of course, shamanic skills. Now, we do know, amongst other things, that the ability to become a berserker, Ulf Hefnar, we're not too sure about the Jolfur and the Raven changes because they were much more secretive, but the Berserk and the Ulf Hefnar were dancers, spear dancers, as they were called. They would do ritual dance states which would expand their consciousness through fasting, exposure to heat, weapon dances, drumming and more, which wound them up into this frenzy before they would just go berserk and start running at the enemy and slaughtering everybody. And some mastered it more than others and could change their state of mind faster. Some say that they could run in so worked up that they physically change. Some say that they would go in as crazed as dogs or wolves, strong as bears or bulls. They bit their shields and slew men, and while they themselves were harmed by neither fire nor iron, and this was when they went berserk. And that's a quote from the Inlinga saga. So the biting or casting away of their shields is a reminder that their ultimate identity, their Hamir, was no longer just that of a person, but a unity with the animal world that they achieved through this trance state that sent them into more. Warriors' shield and weapons were of huge importance in society for status, your persona, who and what you were. So if you went into a rage so powerful that you cast one aside, it marked the really important change going on with you. You couldn't be a man, you were still a boy if you didn't have your shield and weapon. It just wasn't possible. So for a warrior to cast the shield aside and go mad like that, it showed that they had gone way more than just a person and had become one of what they referred to as Odin's men, greater than ordinary men, impervious to all things and able to destroy anything by their power. Now, among other things, besides the Germanic warrior shaman, you got another thing, which were the spirit wives. They were almost the reverse, where it was someone that could become a human when needed, but was not as such. They were shapeshifters from the other side. Sometimes they were Valkyrie or other spirits of Odin or Freya that would come forward and join with the truly great Berserk, which mattered as well. If you were powerful enough to get one of these spirit wives, then it showed that you were indomitable in that way, which made a very big difference. So the ability to do this came from Odin, the giver of Óðr. Óðr is your trance state, the ecstasy, the fury, and the inspiration. And I suppose you can see that it relates to the word other, in that you become other, no more than what you originally were, with just a normal Hamir, like every boring person. So absolutely you could be great. Now, amongst other things, there are varying stories, some of which we know because they've become modern fairy tales and things. But famous people included Trondir, who was a powerful chieftain, a Jarl, who lived in the Faroe Islands in the 9th century. And he was eventually killed by a Christian missionary called Sigmundur, because he was able to change his shape and cause all sorts of trouble. I believe he was a bear. Bristifun went to the islands to spread Christianity, and he too apparently was able to change his shapes. They talk of Raisin and Kellingin, who are a pair of giants who came from the island of Eysturoy and were huge, strong, destructive, and always angry, and they as well were Berserker. And of course, these legends show you a number of strange stories. So, Reynisfjarðar in the south of Iceland, you've probably seen pictures of it. Copenhagen, why are there no comment? Sorry, I missed you there. Copenhagen, why are there no comments? Well, people don't comment a great deal. Anki's on about the following. We are talking about shape-shifting in Viking mythology, which is pretty cool. They've got quite a lot of different varieties, as you may have heard. So we're talking about that, and we're talking about some of the famous shapeshifters that could change or might change in that regard. Now, have you heard of the Black Beach in Iceland? It's that amazing and very, very real beach that is made entirely of black sand. And it is truly stunning to see. But according to legend, the beach, which has not only black sand, but strange basalt columns, originally it were two trolls that were turned to stone and destroyed by the sun. So it seems that the trolls do not always win, even though they are able to change their shape and do all kinds of things. So you can go and walk on trolls if you wish. But now, the runes themselves, you might notice that you get different ones, that they change, and there's a reason for that. The very oldest form are known as the Elder Futhark, and there are 24 written ones and one blank one, which is known as the Weird Rune, so 25 in total, but they are made of 3 sets of 8, Freya's 8, Tyrda's 8, and Hel's 8. Now, as the Vikings moved around, you will find that they took the runes with them when they went to Britain. And the younger Futhark developed there, which is 32 runes, which is made up of the original 25 plus a few extra. And they became part of the original British original history, which is pretty cool. However, with the Vikings, what happened when Christianity moved in? Remember, I said at the beginning, the runes encoded not only magic and writing, but the entirety of society. So when they forced people to become Christian, it destroyed society. And so in secret, people reworked the runes. And now you have the Viking or Nordic Futhark, which is made up of 16 runes, 3 sets of 5, and 1 weird rune, which is the Nordic version of the original. And strangely enough, you know, if you've been to Germany especially, you see those lovely buildings, the white buildings with the black exposed beams. It's called Fachwerk. in German. And what it was designed for was a way to mark your house with runes without the Christians knowing. And if you look at the proper versions, the old versions, they make up the runic shapes. So Fachwerk is using the building method to keep the runes and therefore their culture, which they did, and it worked. So this culture, this magic, this society, and believe it or not, an entire system of martial arts is encoded into the runes, and you can learn it. If you are interested in that, go and check out Hjathgold Stav, and he's created a group which is now run by other people, because he got quite old eventually, but it's his family tradition. And Stav, they have fireandice.org, I think is the website. Fire and Ice Stav. And it's an entire martial arts system using the axe, the Skramas axe, and all the other Staver weapons and unarmed combat that they still practice today around the world. So you can learn a proper Viking original martial arts if you wanted, and perhaps you too could become a Berserk or an Ulfhethnar. So they still are out there, and they still hold all sorts of things. And we know that they still celebrate things like the Thurreblot, the annual midwinter festival that's very much held in Iceland in the month of Þurí, which falls between January and February, where you can eat all of the important dishes like fermented shark and dried fish. I hope you like seafood. Fermented shark, by the way, is very tasty, but you do need to have no sense of smell. But it's nice. Just warning you. So we have that. So yeah, guys, we've only got 15 minutes of the live left, so now's the time to like, share, subscribe, do all the good things, send the gifts to promote the channel. It's been a very, very quiet evening, and even though Good Copenhagen did comment a comment, he hasn't commented on what we're talking about, and with a name like Copenhagen I would have hoped that he would comment. So if you're out there, sir, comment. But yes, these celebrations are still held with folk dancing and varying other feats of strength. Harling showcases athleticism and more in its specialized dancing, usually performed by the men to show their strength and agility. So it's a display as much as it is entertainment. And these dances are found in many other places. The Swedish polska, for example, and the chain dance in the Faroe Islands, which are often accompanied by the Gvesi, the Faroese ballads, which shows that things are not gone, and the old shape-shifting ways remain and are remembered, even in a quiet way. But who else can shapeshift? Well, as we have said, trolls. Trolls are known to shapeshift, and they turn up in Norwegian, Swedish, and Danish folklore. They are mentioned in the Eddas. Some of them have one head, some of them have many heads. Some can shapeshift into various things. And they turn up in a lot of fairy tales and things as well that we remember today. So absolutely, and they show up in other cultures in certain ways as well. Sometimes they are connected with the Jotuns, which the Swedish call the Jata, but we're not really sure where the word troll comes from. They are a particular kind of non-human being. Some say that they are evil, but that's usually something that came from the Christian era afterwards, not originally. They are certainly big and strong, and they have a lot of gold and silver in their dwellings. Sometimes they can be good, sometimes not so. And we know that the Dovregubben, the Troll King, lives in the Dovre Mountains with his court, as you will find in the tale of Peer Gynt. But the trolls are not the only ones. The elves as well, the Alfar, what the Swedish call the Alva, or the Norwegians call the Alv, the Elfe in Danish. And what we get in the English, we speak of as the elves, the light and the dark elves. And they are in the Eddas, of course, beautiful, seductive, residents of the forests, meadows, and mines. They are skilled in magic and illusions. Sometimes they are small, sometimes they are big, sometimes they are semi-transparent. They can change their shape and type dependent on what version of elves they are and from which court they come from, be it the Lossalfar or the Svartalfar. They are known to dance and be happy and to steal away children, and sometimes might possibly even be cannibal in certain cases, especially the Svartalfar. Now, the British ones we know are the Tuatha De Danann and the children of Anun, but the Chthonic ones, it seems, are a little different. They are not related to Anun, but might be related to the children of Dana. They are connected with the Huldra in certain ways, who are a kind of elf, it seems. And some would say even the Skogsra are not just Huldra, but are a little bit different as well. Usually minors in that regard. So perhaps. So your dwarf version. Dwarves are a kind of elf. Skyrim got that right, if you didn't know. Dwarves are elves, they're just a different variety. And very often the dwarves are known as the Svartalfar, the dark elves, or the black elves, which doesn't necessarily mean that they are bad, though it doesn't mean that they are good either. So you've got the Alfar, the Huldra, the Huldu folk, which are a particular kind of elves found only in the Faroe Islands. They are much more like humans, but slightly smaller, with pale skin and long dark hair. And interestingly enough, recently archaeologists discovered a cave filled with small people with DNA different to the normal DNA everyone else has, and they are only ever discovered in the Faroe Islands, where this particular kind of fairy is said to have lived. And it seems then that hobbits or Huldu folk are actually real. They are now just extinct, which is kind of sad. Now, the next interesting one are the Mara. The Mara are famous for changing their shape. And you might recognize the word Mara because it is very similar to the word mare. And they are, in fact, nightmares, creatures that will terrorize the sleeping by riding their victim, bringing them nightmares, apparitions and illusions and sleep paralysis. They could ride, be it man or beast, leaving them drained of energy, as if a whipped horse that is driven to exhaustion with tangled fur and panting. Trees would curl up and wilt if the mares so desired, and of course, in some cases, they could serve as an omen of death, like the Bean Shay of Irish mythology. This is just the Nordic version. And of course, if you were to see one, there's a good chance that the person would pass on, and an autopsy would reveal that their lungs had blackened to nothing. And this was, of course, an explanation for tuberculosis, which was common partly because of lung soot, because of the bad ventilation in buildings. So without proper chimneys, 19th century homes could often cause tuberculosis, and they would say that this was the Mara's touch. Now, how did they come into being? Some say they are the souls of restless children that leave the body at night to haunt the living. Others say that if a woman gave birth in the wrong sort of way, it's possible that her son could become a werewolf, but if it was a girl, it would become a Mara, living for part of the time as a normal person, but thereafter able to do other things. We've spoken, of course, of the Nokken, which is pretty cool, also referred to as a stormcarl or a stromkalen, a freshwater dwelling water spirit that plays a fiddle to lure victims out onto thin ice or onto water in a leaky boat, and then draws them down to the bottom to drown them and eat them. So a stormcarl, the Storstjordjurit, the Great Lake Monster, which is their version of the Loch Ness Monster, also was able to change shape, which is why you can never find the damn thing. Thank you there for the likes. I do appreciate that very, very much. Lots and lots would be good. You also have the Selma, a 13-kilometer long sea serpent that apparently lives in the Seljord in Vestfold og Telemark in Norway. I'm sure we all know where that is, absolutely. In the Lake Seljord. And again, able to change its shape to hide. So absolutely there. You have the Kirchhoff, a sea creature that looks like a man with 3 toes. Its skin is black and red, and it leans slightly to the left because it is misshapen, but it's kind of like a warped merman. Of course, as you mentioned, ask for my name, you have the kraken, which is a giant octopus or squid, which absolutely can change color and shape and more. The selkie, the drager, which is not the same as the whites, the nisse of Norway or the tomte of Sweden. Now, the whites, unlike the other versions, are good, and they take care of the house and barn when the farmer is asleep, as long as the farmer is good to them, leaving out food for the nisse and so on. But if the nisse is ignored or maltreated and the farm is not cared for, he will sabotage everything to treat the farmer a lesson. So treat your nisse with respect, but not too kindly, because there was one Swedish story where a farmer and his wife entered their barn too early and found a little old grey man sweeping the floor. They saw his clothing, which was nothing more than torn rags, so the wife made him new ones. And when the nisse found the new ones in the barn, he suddenly decided he was too elegant to perform labor and disappeared forever. Now, the nisse are associated also with Christmas and Yule, and farmers often will place bowls of rice porridge on the doorstep for the nisse, kind of like the way we leave out cookies and milk for Santa Claus in other cultures. And some say the Nisse will bring you presents. Now the word tomten in Swedish, or tomte, is kind of connected to the plot of land on which you would build your house or cottage. But it's a kind of white which you do see versions of in other religions. It's kind of like your house god or your house spirit, with a small size. Huge thanks for those likes there, I appreciate greatly. So it's your house spirit, like a brownie in British culture, about the size of a 5-year-old child, they say, and they can become invisible and change their shape, becoming a cat or a dog. And then, of course, you have the vitra, which live underground and are usually invisible, but has its own cattle. They're very distant and do not meddle in human affairs for the most part. And should they become enraged, they can be quite fearsome. But give them respect and they're okay. So they can be especially pleased, and this apparently is a ritual some still do, that if you're throwing something outside, you say, look out as you do it, just to warn them, so that they don't get hit and get cross with you, because they can really make your life miserable and drive you quite insane, even possibly unalive you. So even in modern days, people have rebuilt or moved houses in order not to block a vitra way, a way that is for them to pass through, or to move out of a place that is considered their house, the vitrastala, because it would bring bad luck to live on top of them. So vitra, they are kind of like brownies, but sometimes they take the place of trolls. And of course, with all of this, they are shapeshifters that can appear all kinds of small animals around the place to keep an eye on you and make sure that you don't get out of hand, because after all, they are guardians. So those are the shapeshifters of Nordic mythology, the Huldra folk, the Alfa, the Selkie, the warriors, the shaman, and more. They're a strange thing, the Selmanzer, which were the Nordic word for Selkie. The Selkie, of course, is the Scottish. And they're important to history, to mythology, and just maybe to our understanding of the world and how we see the world. But absolutely, if you're ever somebody that wants to learn to manage the powers of the world, of the Aesir, of the Vanir, of the lands and of the worlds of Ran, the Aegir, the sea, Ran, of course, being the goddess of the sea, then you would need to, like Odin, study Galdr and Sether to master the runes such that you may navigate the ways of the weird and become a true sorcerer in the old ways. Because if you can't do that, then you can't manage the world as such it is, and you cannot bring about things to increase your hamingir and give power to all that you do. So those are the ways of the Nordic, and those are the shapeshifters, the Berserk, the Ulfhezna, the Jofer warriors, the masters of Sether and Galdr that ruled the people and held the most power among the Vikinger, those that went Viking when the weather was fair, and farmed when it was not. So there you have it, the things that could be. And of course, as we move along, we are going to do another country and culture and see what shapeshifters they have. And I do believe, seeing as people have brought it up more than once, it is time to have a look at the shapeshifters of North America. Fauns, yes, there's a thought, fauns. Now fauns, where do they come from? They come from Greece. Fauns are Greek. Satyrs are also Greek. So do you think that we should do the shapeshifters of the Greek islands next? We can. Would you prefer that? What do you think, guys? Give me a word. Do you want Greek next? Let's do Greek. Fauns and satyrs, we will do the Greek in the next live. Shapeshifters and more among the Greeks, and the terrible lands with the evil eye and the strange things that may or may not go bump in the night. But with that, we have reached the end of our live. I thank you all for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. I thank you all for your time. And remember, come back. It's a lot of fun. And yes, send plenty of likes, shares, subscribes and more. And I will see you in the next one. So good night, sleep sweet, sleep deep. But sleep with one eye open, and perhaps keep that holy object near at hand, because there are many things, my friends, that are out there that go bump in the night. And if you are not careful, or perhaps respectful, they might go bump for you. Cheers, cheers, cheers.